A little bit. Hey, Patrick. All right, I got two things to discuss before we start looking at the Bible. The first one is my wife and I woke up yesterday morning at 5:15, and we went to Vicious Biscuit and stood in line to be one of the first 100 people. We were numbers 39 and 40. And we get a free biscuit entree.
Each a free entree every month.
A free entree each every month for the rest of our lives for 1 year. Now, it was. I do know the owners just because they're from Hattiesburg. I promise y'all, it was awesome. It's so good. So I had the.
What's it called again?
Vicious Biscuit. I got a free T-shirt yesterday that says "Body by Biscuit."
You've been rocking that though for a while.
Yeah.
Right now too.
What happened? I missed the rip.
It's right next to Tabella. Right. All right. I got what's called the Vicious. Listen, hey, everybody, listen. This is real important.
Oh.
I got the Vicious Benny, which is their take on Eggs Benedict, and so it's a really good biscuit, open face. There's a big piece of smoked ham on both halves, an over easy fried egg on both halves, a good lemony, zingy hollandaise sauce over the top. It was
A liberal coating of hollandaise as well. They did not skim.
I didn't need anything.
what now?
Did you get anything from the jam and butter bar?
Mary Martin did. I did not.
I did, but I got
It'd be weird to put that on the Benedict.
sweet potato butter.
Did this store open yesterday?
The grand opening was yesterday. I think who has been? Raise your hand if you've been. Did anybody? Does?
It has 398 reviews on Google.
All right. Here's the next thing. Hey, y'all, please, can we get serious? I'm wearing a shirt today that is intended to be worn untucked. So you may not know this, ladies, but several years ago there was this trend in men's fashion where they made shirts that were a little shorter so they could be worn untucked. Well, I always tuck in my shirt, long sleeve shirts. Here's the problem. Because of my Body by Biscuit, the bottom of the shirt is super close right here. So, like, if I were to lift my hands in worship today, you could see, like...
Your busted can.
I'm sorry that happened. That was hurtful. My wife and I were at WinShape last week. I say this, maybe I need to, this is just a fact. I am so thankful. I'm so thankful for Forrest last week teaching. He arguably, either maybe next week, but certainly last week, that was a rich doctrinal passage that he taught through that end of chapter 5, and he did a great job. And I'm so thankful. He's not even here. Never mind. He's not even faithful. The guy's not even faithful. All right. Chapter 6. Huh?
I don't know. He might be serving the preschool. I think I saw it.
No.
No, he's at
All right.
They're start days.
Never mind.
One more thing. Now we're actually starting Sunday school. Everybody watch this. Look at me. What I've drawn here is a very accurate depiction of what in our passage today is going to be referred to as the Sea of Tiberias. Now, in the Bible, this particular body of water that is 13 miles north to south and at its widest point 8 miles from east to west, crucial to the biblical story. We see lots and lots happen on this body of water. Does anybody know what other names in the New Testament this body of water has? The Sea of Galilee is correct. There are two more. Sea of Galilee is the most common one, by the way. Does anybody know the others? Lake Gennesaret, it's mentioned one time in the Bible. And most interestingly to me, in the Old Testament, in the book of Numbers, this is referred to Chinnereth. Chinnereth is the Hebrew word for harp. And it has a little bit of a heart shape. Harp, not heart, harp like the instrument. So anyway, don't get confused today. The Sea of Tiberias is the Sea of Galilee, is the lake at Gennesaret, is Chinnereth. And it's important, one more thing. What we're going to talk about today, the feeding of the 5,000, probably happened in this hilly region that's between the city of Tiberias and the lake. Capernaum is very important because later on in this chapter, there's going to be a boat ride that goes from here across the northern part of the lake. I'm loving this thing. Goes from here across the northern part of the lake, and there's going to be some wind involved. That's next week. We'll talk about that. But that's just a geographical reference as to what's going on today. We're not, Philip, who we're going to meet, is from Tiberias. We know that from history. And we'll tie all this together here. We don't meet him today, by the way. We don't talk about him today. I'm sorry I said it that way. All right. Please, someone, feeding of the 5,000. Can you name how many Gospels describe this particular miracle? All of them. This was a very noteworthy miracle. I would argue maybe outside of maybe David and Goliath. Is this one of the big children's Bible stories? Is it still like we do this one a lot. Okay. So recorded in all four Gospels, which is going to be very helpful for us today. And this is a biggie, if you will. Arguably his most public miracle. The crowd that watched this was enormous. And so this is a big deal, as everything Jesus did was. Somebody please read for me through, we're going to have to spend some time on 15 next week too, but today let's include 15 in our reading. So this is John chapter 6, verses 1 through 15. Somebody please go.
After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him, because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself.
Thank you so much, Savannah McNair, a missionary. Welcome to Jonathan and Savannah, both missionaries. So this passage opens with the phrase, "after this." We know because of, and really only because of John's references to the different Passover feasts here as well, we know that this was, depending on the feast that Jesus was at last week in chapter 5, sometime between 6 months and 1 year has passed. So just know that that doesn't really affect anything other than I want you to know that much had happened. We know some of the stuff that happened from the other Gospels, but John, in his writing, chose to go from the doctrinal passage last week about Jesus being equal to his Father to the feeding of the 5,000 right here. And the reason I tell you that, or the reason that it's important for me to know that, and you as well, is because Jesus' ministry was approaching its pinnacle in popularity. So Jesus' ministry was between 3.5 and 4 years long. We're about halfway through it. By the way, it's all downhill from here. By the end of this chapter, look at it. Go to verse 66. This is the same chapter, okay? After this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So what we're seeing here is this pinnacle in popularity that Jesus is enjoying, little e, in quotations. Jesus is really popular right here, where we begin chapter 6. He has been doing many miracles, and a huge number of people have begun to follow him around. Why? To see miracles. I would do the same thing, right? I'm a broken record here, but like it's so easy to judge these people and judge the Pharisees and judge. I'd be just like them. Like if there was a dude that I heard was healing people, you can go and watch it, and he was in Purvis, I'd go to Purvis and I would watch it happen. I would want to see it happen, and this is what was going on. And this is a huge crowd of people. To add to that, we're approaching the Passover, and there were people that would have been traveling from the east over here, crossing the Jordan River, getting to Jerusalem, and so you had all this. Listen to this hat trick of things that's going on here. You had Jesus working miracles, so even had it not been the Passover, there were people that wanted to be around him. You had an increased population in the area because people were trying to get to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. And so, in addition to that, put those two together kind of as a third thing, there was this thinking, as we saw in verse 15, there was this thinking that this Messiah was about to be the deliverance of the Jewish people from the Roman kingdom. And so people, and because of those three things, we end up, check it out, you probably were taught this in Sunday school, 5,000 men, like in history, this is often, we number the men. We don't do that today, good. So 5,000 men, and probably in total, this group that's about to get fed is between 15 and 20,000 people. Okay? So, Jesus, we don't know, John does not tell us, we know a little bit from the other Gospels, but Jesus, it says in verse 1, went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, same thing. By the way, during Jesus' life, Tiberius became the emperor, and they built this city. This city, Tiberias, would not have been there when Jesus was born, but it was here now, and so if you were so John's writing, and if you were a Roman thinker, this is what you would have called this now, the Sea of Tiberias. Like, this is the Donald Trump move. I'm being, that's off, but it's true. He renamed it to bring attention to himself. I didn't mean to say it that way. I really didn't mean to say it that way. Stop it. So Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Now, the other Gospels tell us that Jesus, this crowd had begun to follow him everywhere he went. How exhausting that must have been. Like to always be on your, like again, he's God. I'm not saying that this was, I'm just saying that in his humanity, this must have been exhausting. He got very little time to himself, and we see him now increasingly escaping, getting away to spend time praying and to be alone. But this crowd has begun following him because we know from the other Gospels, he had compassion. And all these, it seems that from the other Gospel writers that he was just in the habit of, out of compassion, healing constantly. Just because he loves people. He loves human beings. He doesn't like suffering. He wants to do, to the degree that it honors God, he rids us of suffering. All right. Now the Passover, verse 3, Jesus went up on the mountain, And there he sat with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. And lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, stop right there. All right, so Jesus crosses the Sea of Galilee. There's a hilly region right here called the Golan Heights, I'm not sure. So the ESV says mountains. It was just a hilly area. If you're from Summerall, they were mountains, I'm sure. And so they were in this desolate place. They were not in the city. Okay? So Jesus was staying out of the city, but people from these cities had heard where he was. He got discovered. He maybe had a 12 hours or 24 hours of respite from these crowds. But Jesus looks up and he sees them coming. And this isn't the first time it had happened. He was living, this was his life right now. He was living, enjoying, little e, in quotes, great popularity. He was super famous in the region right now. But they were not in the city. They were in a desolate place here. And it was a grassy area. We see that from the reading. And it was certainly on or very, very near this big body of water. Any questions or comments? And the reason I'm asking that right now is this is a well-studied, well-taught, everybody's familiar with it perhaps. Anybody want to add to that? I mean, are there interesting, yes, Patrick?
That picture is that area.
Look at you. That guy. Is this the Sea of Galilee? Also known as the Sea of Tiberias? Lake Gennesaret? Chinnereth? All right.
The Gulf of East America.
Now I want to... Now, let's go ahead and begin. I want us to begin right here, making application here. This is a wonderful piece of history, and it is fascinating, and there is much to be curious about and to be amazed about. But John did not write this just so we would fall into the same trap that these followers were, so we would just be amazed by a miracle. John writes this as part of a chapter that starts with his popularity being at a zenith to literally at the end of this chapter, in droves, people are turning away because they don't want to hear what he has to say. All right? So I'm going to ask us two questions, and we'll flesh these out. We're going to flesh these two questions out. First question. What happens when we forget? Just think. This is meant to create good discussion. What happens when we forget that Jesus supplies all of our needs? What is the human mindset when we forget that Jesus supplies all of our needs?
That we supply all of our needs.
That's what we believe, is that we're...
So then you have worry and fear and anxiety and...
It's not like self-preservation. Just hold on to the things you know you have because those are the only things that
Because in your mind, this is all I've got, right? Anything else?
like pride that what I've accomplished and like, oh, I've worked for this.
This is my stuff. I see, yeah.
Then like on the flip, you have the anxiety of like, well, what can come next? But when you do feel like your needs are met, being very prideful about it.
Good. Yeah, I'm guilty of that. Anything else? Second question. What happens when we get this wrong? What Jesus gives to us spiritually is more important than what he gives to us earthly. So let me say it again, or maybe I'll say it a different way. What Jesus is most interested in, because he knows this is what's best for us, is to meet our spiritual needs. What happens when we imagine that our earthly needs are equal to our spiritual needs? What wrong thinking does that cause?
That this is like as good as it gets. That this is like our goal or
This is my life. My life is the summation of what I think I need right now on this earth. Yeah. Other comment? There it is. We're going to say a little bit more about that. But this idea that Jesus is at his best, that God is at his best when he's giving us earthly blessings, stuff.
Makes it us instead of God.
Yeah. And it's a broken record, but can't we all do that? Like, isn't this our nature? to find ourselves in a pinch, to feel some pressure, some discomfort, and for us to imagine that what I need most is for God to solve this problem in what we think is the obvious best way to do it. So this is what I want you, this is really what I believe. This is the most beneficial way. I'm not discounting the miracle that happens. Please, I'm not saying that the historicity of this is not important. What I am saying is that in chapter 6, we see Jesus getting great praise because he met a physical need. And when he describes what his bigger purpose is later on in this chapter, which is his spiritual blessing that comes, what is required to be spiritually blessed by God, repentance, this thinking of ourselves the right way, the way God thinks about us. Verse 66, by the droves, people just walked away. I'm here for the miracles. I'm here for the good stuff in human eyes. All right, J.C. Ryle, he's been dead a long time, but he had a big beard, and so it means that he's wise. But he wrote this regarding this passage. There seems no reason, says J.C. Ryle, there seems no reason to suppose that this multitude followed our Lord for any but low motives. They, quote, saw his miracles, and that was all. Some, few, perhaps, were in doubt and suspense, wondering whether he who wrought such miracles could possibly be the Messiah. But the great majority probably followed from that vague, idle curiosity and love of excitement, which are the principles that gather nearly every crowd in the world. You show me a big crowd and there's excitement. And what's happened is, J.C. Ryle, he wrote this, by the way, around in the late 1800s he wrote this. But I would say even more today. Even in churches, excite me. Get me excited about something. Show me a miracle. How about a victory? Give me a breakthrough. And it's one of the reasons, I'm not telling you what to listen to or not listen to. I just happen to be, it's not wrong to listen to any worship music that brings attention to the goodness of God. But those songs that concentrate on God's going to work a miracle, God's going to give me a victory, those can so easily be misunderstood. I'm jumping almost to the end. We're really not about to finish. It sounds like I'm wrapping things up. Here's the big point today. Man, I know there are hurts in this room. Y'all, my wife and I have got a deep hurt in our life right now over one of our children. And we're praying and desperately, desperately asking God to move in our child's heart. It might be illness, it could be tragedy, it could be financial, it could be relational. But friends, Christ's worth can never be determined on how He meets our perceived needs on this earth. If He never, ever heals us, if He never brings to salvation a loved one, if He never gives resolution to a financial need, friends, in the end, our existence in heaven will be wonderful. And so says Paul, these struggles of this earth will pale. These folks were here for the miracle, and I can be there for the miracle. And Jesus is going to tell us later in the chapter, 2 weeks from now we'll study it. He offers something way better than earthly comfort. Way better than barley bread in this example. Any comments? That's not the end. I jumped to the end, but that's not the end. Anything? So we've already met Philip, but this is interesting. Philip was from Tiberias. And so maybe, it's not really important, but perhaps Jesus turns to Philip and says, my paraphrase, how are we going to feed these folks? Maybe because Philip might be the one that would be like, oh, I know about Tiberias. I know where we can do this or that or whatever. We don't know. We know what Philip said, though. Verse 5 again. Lifting up his eyes and then seeing that large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, where are we to buy bread for this many people to eat? It's a good question. Y'all, had we been there, we would have had the same question. We know from the other Gospels it was getting late. It was time for them to get a meal. And Philip said 200 denarii would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. 200 denarii would be roughly 8 months of wages. A denarii was 1 day's work, the wage for 1 day. And this is just plainly, Philip is making the point, there's no way we can afford. There's no possible way we can feed all these people. Now, we know there's other dialogue, and again, I would encourage you, it takes about 5 minutes to do. Go to Matthew, Mark, and Luke and read that, and we learn more details. It doesn't change the sense of the story that we have here in John, but there were more things that were said around this conversation. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there's a boy here that has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many? Somebody from Sunday school, describe what these, what was, I always, like the guy, you always see these cartoons of the basket, right? What did it look like?
Like an Easter basket, right? I mean, a handle and that's what
He had a great basket, right? What did the meal look like?
2 French loaves.
That's it. It's big, long things of bread, like soft, delicious bread. And big flopping, like, yeah. Here's what this was probably. Barley was the poor man's grain. So wheat was much more desirable, but wheat was much more expensive. So these 5 loaves were not loaves in the sense of my wife's homemade bread. They weren't. They were 5 wafers or 5 biscuits, body by biscuit. They were 5 biscuits that would have been, to the common person, just the most rudimentary saltine crackers kind of thing. Like there was nothing, this was not a king's meal by any regard. Also, probably the role of the fish was simply to be able to smear on it to make it more appetizing. They would have been like saltines. They would have been cured or salted. They weren't like, the pictures he was going to fillet these fish and like.
It was for sure tuna.
But they were almost certainly tiny little fish. And by the Greek word that's used here has this idea of being diminutive. Like this was a small portion. It was meager, it was small, it was insufficient. That's the whole point. There was nothing about this that would lead one to believe that here's the start of something magnificent. Jesus said, have the people sit down. How many people?
20 dollars.
All right, so here's another thing. It's easy to, I don't know why I think this way, but in my mind, this whole thing took like 15 minutes. This was quite the
Situation.
So what happened is that Jesus communicated with his disciples, and his disciples would then go communicate with the crowd. And he asked them, we know from both Mark and Matthew, I think, I can't remember, but he said, seat them in groups of 50 or 100. And so, and this is going to make sense. There's a good reason for this. And so we're in this desolate place. We know there's a lot of grass. There's 15,000 people or so there. And Jesus has just been shown barley and sardines, if you will. And he says, all right, here's the plan. Divide them into, all right, disciples. And it was more than just his 12, right? So his 12 were there. But when this says disciples, it was probably many more people. Like the word disciples here does not mean the 12. It was more. And he said to the people that were helping him, 15,000 people, okay? Go divide up into groups of 50 or 100 and have them sit down. And so they did that. You didn't do this in 12 minutes. Like this was a big like there was a lot of work to be done here. So he gets them all spread out and he gets them all set down. So the men sat down, about 5,000, that's 5,000 men in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, when you say your blessing, you're copying Jesus, right? This is like Jesus thanked his heavenly Father for these loaves and these fish. When he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish as much as they wanted. Now, Patrick and I were talking this morning before class. He just watched, by the Lord's design, the episode of The Chosen where this happened. Can I say that I've never watched The Chosen? I don't have a problem if you enjoy The Chosen. The Chosen doesn't know exactly how it happened. So anytime we see something like this, it is important that we not believe something that the Bible doesn't include. But The Chosen, interestingly, this is how they had it happening. And the reason I'm saying this is because don't you want to just know what it looked like? We don't know. Patrick was telling me that well, you tell it, that Jesus broke the bread.
Broke the bread, put it into the original basket, and set it on the ground, and then walks away.
And lo and behold.
And then one of the disciples picks it up and realized it was much heavier than what it should have been. And as soon as he opened it, all the baskets were full.
So we don't know if it happened that way. But y'all, here's the point. To Patrick, something happened that was amazing. It's not like his disciples knew what was happening. They were greatly moved by this, that he was working such a miracle. And it would have been visible, right? The people came to see a miracle. Here's a miracle. I'm going to feed all of you, and I'm going to just not magically. I'm sorry I even said that. I really am. I'm going to miraculously, I'm sorry I said magically. That was terribly careless. Miraculously, I'm going to make what was not here. I'm going to take what is here and make much, much, much more than was here. And so systematically, they begin to distribute this to these groups of 50 or 100. And the Bible says that the people ate all that they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told the disciples, gather up the leftover fragments so that nothing may be lost. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. How big were those baskets? Does anybody know? Anybody ever studied this? It's a trick question. You want to think they were huge baskets. They weren't. That doesn't take away from the miracle, right? In Vacation Bible School, they look like laundry hampers, and they're just filled with all this excess bread. I think it's more meaningful that Jesus made enough with a little left over, and the word basket here, these 12 baskets, was a basket that would carry the food for a day or two, and so each of the disciples, or maybe the 12, I'm not saying there's symbolism, I'm not trying to make something mystical about this, but there were 12 baskets that would have been enough to meet the needs of several people for a couple of more days. So it doesn't have to be that there were laundry baskets. Let's don't make more of it than it is.
They got a to-go box.
It's a to-go box. Can I have a to-go? Yes, you can, said Jesus.
Say it the Lord.
All right, here's the crowd's response, verse 14. When the people, so this is 15,000 people, when the people saw, or 20, what he had done, they said, here's the proof. This is Moses returned. Here comes our deliverance. And it says that perceiving 15 that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew. So he probably, it's not said this way, but probably there was something miraculous about this as well. Jesus made himself go away. I'm not saying he vanished into thin air, but I'm saying that he was able to somehow, after being looked at and watched by these 15,000 people, the fact that he was able to withdraw probably leads us to think that there was something miraculous, whether he made himself just not noticed or whatever. All right, that's the text. Anybody have any comments before we run back and dig into what some more important stuff? Any comments about the text?
I'm always astounded that Andrew offers up anything at all. Like, can you imagine, looking around at, a whole stadium worth of people and being like, hey, we ain't got got anything. We don't have any money. We can't buy anything, but just in case it's helpful. I know it's not.
Kudos to
I know it's
Andrew,
not
right?
helpful, but here's
So-
this one kid's lunch.
Andrew is not mentioned often in the Bible, but every time, without exception, when he's mentioned, he's doing something that's faithful. And Savannah's point's a good one. I would have been like Philip. I'd have been like, and Andrew, he doesn't know what's fixing to happen, and he's not predicting a miracle necessarily, but he says, here's a resource. I mean, it's probably more than I would have said, but it's a good point, Savannah.
I would not. I would have been like, thank you, little boy, for your lunch.
This is okay, that's cute. Look how cute. Look how cute that was.
That's precious.
Anything else?
The little boy in the story is he's not normally a character I think about in the story, but in one of the kids' books we have for Lily, it's talk about sharing, and it uses the boy who shares his loaves and his fish with Jesus, and that's why we should share, because that little boy shared. And I just never really thought about the little boy. I was like, he just gave his lunchbox, but I think it's really sweet that he shared his food with people he didn't know. It was supposed to be his food for the day. And I just think that always reminds us of having faith like a child. I'm not saying the child was like, that's the prophet.
Right.
But he was just so willing to share, I assume. So I don't know, he's just fun to think about. I never thought about him until he was in the kids' book.
And so let me just add something even more encouraging. So everything you said is exactly true. But the point of this story is that when we share what we see as earthly resources, this is all I got, that Jesus is able to take it, and don't make too much, that Jesus is able to take it and do everything that needs to be done. You're right, all that's true. I'm not belittling what you said. But in addition to that, our generosity is not limited by, Jesus can take the things that we give and do much more with them than we imagined that we could have done with them. Anything else? Great point. This is not the verse that gets dialed in on when you're in Vacation Bible School. But I want to go back and I want to just encourage us with this. Look at the verse. Verse 6. He's just asked Philip, hey, local, hey, Mr. Tiberius, where can we get some food? What are we going to do here? Philip answers the way I would have. He gave an answer that was like, ain't gonna happen. And verse 6 is a often overlooked, but I really want us to, this is so encouraging. He said this to test him, for he himself, so this is Jesus. Jesus said this to test Philip, for Jesus knew what he would do. I'll turn there. We're almost out of time. Well, we can do it. If you would, turn to the book of James. When we read, anytime you see Jesus ask a question, we saw this with the lady at the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus never asks a question to learn something, right? So Jesus is not asking Philip this question because Jesus is curious about what are some options. Any ideas, anybody? What are some options? This word test is the same word. I want us to see it in a more full, little systematic theology here. James chapter 1, verse 2. We should study the book of James sometimes. It's a great one. They're all great. Sorry I said magic. Sorry I acted like James was more important than any other. Count it all joy. What a non-intuitive verse we're about to read. Count it all joy, my brothers, when we meet trials. That word trials there is the same word that is used in John for the word test. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet tests or trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So here's the wonderful, encouraging application. My life, your life, big and small, is filled with tests. And Jesus is asking us, if you will, what are you going to do? He says to Philip, we need to feed 20,000 people. What can we do? Jesus was not looking for Philip's input. Jesus was setting Philip up to see himself, Jesus. Jesus was setting Philip up to see and take notice of how Jesus solves problems faithfully. Now, in this case, it was quite the miracle. When James writes this, there's no presumption that there's going to be miracles. It's that it leads to something more important than a bunch of food. It leads to steadfastness. God never uses sin to tempt us, right? The test, like when we sin, that's not God testing us. But when we have very difficult things in our life, problems big, problems small, we should view them with joy because these are tests. These are trials that God allows to enter our life. And just like Jesus knew what He was about to do, you take any trial in your life right now, Jesus knows what He's about to do. And the result of it will be, if we're faithful, steadfastness. It has to be the case that after all this was said and done, that Philip's faith, his willingness to imagine that Jesus was going to be a provider, was increased. And so it is with us, that when we meet trials, and Jesus, God says, if you will, what are we going to do? God knows exactly what He's going to do. And when we are faithful, we get a reward much better than barley biscuits. We get steadfastness, that stick-to-itiveness, that belief that my history with God will always reveal that He is capable and wise and willing to do what's best. So, not to sound too much like a preacher, but what's your trial? I know some of your trials. You know some of my trials. God knows what He is going to do. Don't worry. Any comments? I love you guys. Let's pray. Father, would you please help me as a husband and a father and as a man to be faithful, Lord, to when I think about the trials in my life, Father, for my mind to default to this truth that you're a good God who only does for us those things that will ultimately work out for your kingdom. Lord, help me not be like these people who were following Him, who were looking for earthly deliverance, whether it was from hunger in this case or in a little bit bigger sense, deliverance from an oppressive government. Father, those are real problems, and we as Christians should try to meet the needs of people. But Father, let it never be that me in my thinking or that me in my ministry opportunities, never let me believe that what we do for people in the temporal is as important as to what we offer them in the eternal. So Father, thank you for this passage of Scripture. Thank you for your omniscience and your perfect power. And Lord, help us be encouraged by our trials, like James says, so that when we watch you solve problems for us in ways that are best, it leads us to expect you to solve problems for us in the way that is best. Amen.